December 22nd, 1944, northern Alsace, 11 degrees above zero. Klara Weiss had been standing in a prison pen for almost 9 hours. Not walking, not sitting, standing. 36 German women stood around her inside a rectangle of barbed wire, their boots locked to frozen mud, their breath rising in short white bursts that disappeared before it reached the fence. Klara was 25 years old, a teleprinter clerk, a clockmaker's daughter from Ulm. She had never fired a rifle in her life. But that night, to the American soldiers outside the wire, she was still the enemy, and the enemy was not supposed to ask for mercy. Klara took one step toward the nearest guard. Her knees shook so badly she almost fell. "Please," she said in broken English. "The ground is not ground anymore." The young American stared at her. Klara pointed down at the frozen mud, then at the women behind her. Then she made the shape of sitting with her hands. "Too cold. We cannot sit." The guard did something Klara did not expect. He stepped inside the wire, crouched down, took off one glove, and pressed his bare fingers to the earth. He felt the ground for himself. Then he stood up. He looked at Klara and walked away. Every woman in that pen thought the same thing. That was the answer. Nothing. No pity. No explanation. No help. Just the enemy turning his back. But the guard had not walked away to ignore her. He had walked away to find an officer, and before the hour was over, 3 trucks would roll into that dark field carrying something no one in that enclosure understood how to receive. Not punishment, not interrogation, not humiliation, wood, straw, canvas. A thin barrier between human bodies and the ice. And for the rest of her life, Klara Weiss would remember that night as the first time she understood a terrifying truth. The enemy she had been taught to fear had listened better than the country she had served. Before the war, Klara Weiss measured time by sound. Her father repaired clocks in a narrow shop near the Danube. Every wall ticked, pocket watches ticked, mantel clocks ticked. A tall walnut clock near the front window struck the hour so loudly that customers sometimes laughed and stepped backward. Klara grew up sweeping brass shavings from the floor, sorting tiny screws into jars, and listening to her father say the same thing whenever a mechanism failed. "Do not hit it first. Listen first." That was his rule. Listen before you touch the spring. Listen before you open the case. Listen before you decide what is broken. Her mother, Elise, ran the household with a seamstress's patience. She could mend a coat sleeve so cleanly the tear seemed ashamed of itself. Klara's younger brother, Oscar, wanted to fly airplanes. Her sister, Marta, wanted only to leave Ulm and see Paris. In 1938, those dreams still sounded possible. By 1941, possibility had become paperwork. The shop stayed open, but brass was rationed. Replacement parts vanished. Customers paid with promises. Her father joined organizations he did not care about because refusal had become dangerous. Her brother stopped talking about airplanes as toys and began talking about them as service. Klara had one useful skill. She could type fast. Faster than anyone in her commercial school. She could hear a sentence in French, write it in German, then repeat the German sentence back without losing a number. That made her valuable to the communications office. First the postal service, then the air raid warning network, then a military signals detachment near Strasbourg. She was given a gray uniform, a cap that never sat properly on her head, and a pair of headphones that smelled of dust and sweat. She was not brave. She was not ideological. She was useful. That was enough. Her job was to sit at a machine that clattered like angry teeth and move messages between officers who never looked at her. Fuel reports, road closures, hospital transfers, names of units retreating west, then south, then east. In the beginning, the war sounded distant through the wires. By the winter of 1944, it sounded like a wall cracking. The first sign that everything was collapsing came not from a speech but from the burn barrel. On December 20th, the officers began feeding papers into fire. Maps, signal pads, rosters, anything with stamps, anything with names, anything that could explain who had been where and when. Klara watched a captain burn a stack of telephone codes with bare hands because he could not find gloves. The next morning, their supervisor, Frau Oberfeldwebel Renner, gave the order, "Pack what you can carry. The line is moving." No one said, "Retreat." Retreat had become one of those words everyone understood and no one used. Klara packed a wool scarf, a comb, half a bar of soap, and a photograph of her family standing in front of the clock shop. Her father wore his dark apron. Her mother had one hand on Oscar's shoulder. Marta was smiling too widely, as if the camera had caught her before she could become serious. They were told they had 4 hours, they had 40 minutes. The shelling started before noon. Not close enough to see. Close enough to make the windows shake, then close enough to break them. Women ran down a corridor lined with telephone wire. Someone dropped a satchel of message forms. White sheets flew across the floor like startled birds. Klara reached the yard and climbed into the back of a supply truck with 20 other women. Another truck took the rest. The driver shouted that he knew a route east through farm roads. For 6 miles, it worked. Then the convoy met refugees coming the other direction. Carts, children, old men pulling mattresses with rope, soldiers without helmets, soldiers without rifles. A wounded horse standing in the road because no one had the strength to move it. By dusk, the truck had no fuel. By night, the women were walking. They moved along a frozen ditch under a moon so bright it made the snow look blue. Nobody sang. Nobody complained. Complaint belonged to people who believed someone might answer. At dawn, American infantry found them near an orchard outside a village whose sign had been knocked flat. The first American voice Klara heard was young and frightened. "Hands up!" Frau Renner stepped out first, both arms raised. "Nicht schießen!" Do not shoot. The soldiers' rifles stayed high. More Americans came from the road. Helmets, muddy coats, red faces from the cold. Rifles pointing everywhere at once. Klara raised her hands. The family photograph slipped from her coat and landed in the frost. An American private bent down, picked it up, looked at the 4 faces in the picture, then looked at Klara. For one suspended second, she expected him to tear it. He handed it back. No expression. No kindness she could name. Just a small decision not to be cruel. The women were searched, counted, and loaded into trucks. The Americans separated them from male prisoners immediately. Nobody explained why. Nobody explained where they were going. The propaganda lectures had explained everything else. American soldiers were undisciplined. They hated German women. They would laugh at prisoners. They would make examples of them. Klara waited for the first slap. It never came. That almost made it worse. Fear knows what to do with cruelty. It does not know what to do with ordinary procedure. The holding pen lay beside a road churned by trucks and half-frozen ruts. It had no barracks. No stove, no tent. Only wire sentry posts and a command shed made from a damaged farm office. A sergeant pointed inside the enclosure. "Stand here. Processing later." His German was poor, but the meaning was clear. Stand. Do not sit. Do not move toward the fence. The women obeyed. At first, standing felt possible. Their legs hurt from walking. Their boots were stiff. The cold was sharp, but not yet impossible. The first hour passed, then the second. The sun dropped behind a black row of trees. The guards outside the wire changed shifts. They had fires and oil drums. They stamped their feet, warmed their hands, drank from tin cups, and returned to the fence. Inside the wire, the women did not rotate. They simply stood. By the 5th hour, Klara's toes were gone. Not numb. Gone. She could not feel where her feet ended and the frozen earth began. By the 7th hour, one of the youngest girls, Annalisa Hartmann, began to sway. She was 17 and had been assigned to the unit only 2 months before. She kept whispering that she was not tired, not tired, not tired. Then her knees folded. Klara caught her under one arm. 2 other women grabbed the girl before she hit the ground. "Keep her up," Frau Renner said. Her voice was no longer an order. It was fear. If she sits, she will not get back up. That was the rule of the ground. The cold did not attack all at once. It negotiated. First the toes, then the ankles, then the knees, then the will. It asked for 1 inch of surrender at a time. Klara looked toward the nearest guard. He was younger than her brother would have been if the war had allowed boys to remain boys. Thin face, chapped lips, freckles across the bridge of his nose. His rifle looked too large for him. She stepped forward. Bit. He turned. Klara tried again. "Please." Her English was rusty, assembled from school lessons and cinema posters. "The ground, it is ice." He frowned. She pointed at Annalise, then at the frozen earth. "We cannot sit. We fall." The guard glanced behind him, as if afraid another soldier might see him listening. Then he opened the gate. The women stiffened. He stepped inside, slowly. He crouched, he removed one glove, and he touched the ground. That was the detail Klara never forgot. Not the trucks, not the straw. His hand. The fact that he did not take her word for it, and he did not dismiss it either. He checked. He made the suffering real enough to report. Inside the command shed, Private Thomas Avery stood in front of Lieutenant Daniel Mercer, a 29-year-old officer who had been awake for 30 hours. Mercer had landed in France months earlier with more confidence than sense. By December, he had lost both. His unit was short on blankets, short on trucks, short on translators, short on patients. Reports from the north were full of rumors about American prisoners shot after surrender. Every soldier had heard something. Nobody knew what was true yet. Everybody knew enough to be angry. Avery took off his helmet. "Sir, the German women in the pen are asking to sit." Mercer looked up from a stack of prisoner forms. "Asking?" "Yes, sir." "Did they give you trouble?" "No, sir. They say the ground's frozen." "I checked it." Mercer stopped writing. "You checked it?" "Yes, sir." "And?" "It's hard as a floor." For a moment the room was quiet except for the stovepipe ticking. Mercer rubbed his face with both hands. "How long have they been out there?" "Since afternoon. 8 hours, maybe more." "How long until transportation clears?" "Could be tomorrow. Could be the day after." Mercer looked at the forms, then toward the dark window. There are moments in war when cruelty arrives dressed as efficiency. No one has to shout. No one has to hate. No one even has to make a decision. You just let the cold do what the cold is already doing. Mercer put down his pencil. "Get Harlan from supply. Find every broken crate, door plank, burlap sack, and tarpaulin he can spare." Avery blinked. "Sir, that pen needs a floor." "Sir, supply is thin." "I know supply is thin. We don't have enough blankets for every—" "I didn't say blankets. I said a floor." Avery nodded. "Yes, sir. And private?" "Sir, move now." 45 minutes later, Klara heard engines. Every woman in the enclosure went silent. Trucks at night meant movement. Movement meant another camp, another search, another unknown. But the trucks stopped outside the wire, and the guards did not call names. They unloaded wood, not neat lumber, not anything fine. Broken barn doors, flat sides of packing crates, planks ripped from damaged storage bins, then sacks of straw from a nearby stable. Then heavy canvas that smelled of oil and rain. The Americans opened the gate and carried everything in. No one explained, no one apologized. No one performed mercy, as if mercy needed an audience. They simply went to work. They laid the boards over the frozen mud. They wedged crate panels into gaps. They threw straw across the wood. They spread canvas over the straw and fastened the edges with stones, rope, and bits of wire. A corporal with a cigarette in his mouth kept cursing at the canvas when the wind lifted it. A guard laughed once. Another told him to shut up because the prisoners were watching. The whole thing took less than half an hour. When it was finished, Private Avery stood near the gate, pointed to the makeshift platform, and said the only German word he seemed certain about. "Sitzen." Sit. Nobody moved. Not at first. Rules in captivity were dangerous because rules could change faster than bodies could obey them. 5 minutes earlier, sitting had been forbidden. Now sitting was permitted. That did not make it safe. Avery seemed to understand. He walked to the platform, sat down on the canvas himself, slapped one palm against it, and stood. Safe. Annalise was the first to try. She lowered herself carefully, as if the boards might vanish beneath her. The straw gave under her weight. The canvas held. She put both hands over her face. Then she began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way a person cries when the body realizes it no longer has to spend every ounce of strength pretending it can survive. That broke the pen. Women sank down all at once. Some sat with their knees pulled to their chests. Some leaned shoulder to shoulder. Some lay on their sides and curled into themselves like children. Klara lowered herself last. Her knees burned so sharply that she gasped. Then she felt it. The cold was still there. It rose through the wood. It found gaps. It reminded them that nothing had been fixed completely. But the ice no longer owned her bones. An inch of wood had changed the meaning of the night. Klara looked through the wire. Lieutenant Mercer stood near the command shed, collar up, clipboard under one arm. He watched only long enough to see that the women were sitting. Then he turned away and went back to work. That also mattered. He did not ask to be thanked. He did not tell them America was merciful. He did not say this was what civilized armies did. He let the board say it. The next morning, the women were given hot coffee so weak it was nearly brown water, and soup with barley floating in it. It tasted like life. A medic checked feet. 2 women had frostbite. 1 had cracked skin bleeding inside her boot. The medic did not scold them for weakness. He did not laugh. He cut away the stocking, cleaned the skin, wrapped the toes, and wrote something on a tag. Over the next 2 days, the pen changed in small, practical ways. A second sheet of canvas appeared when sleet began. A barrel stove was placed outside the wire close enough to warm the air, not close enough to become a weapon. The women were allowed to remove their boots for short periods while a guard watched the fence line. Nobody called it kindness. That word would have made it smaller. It was discipline. It was procedure. It was restraint made visible. And that was harder for Klara to understand than open hatred. Hatred would have matched what she had been told. Restraint did not. On the 3rd day, Private Avery came to the wire holding a folded piece of paper. "Weiss," he called. Klara stood too quickly and nearly fell. "Yes." He passed the paper through the wire. Red Cross message. Her hands shook so badly she could barely open it. The note had been stamped, censored, delayed, and forwarded through channels she could not imagine. It was only 12 lines long. Her father's handwriting was smaller than she remembered. The clock shop had been damaged by bombing but not destroyed. Her mother was alive. Marta was alive. Oscar was missing somewhere near the Eastern Front. Klara read that sentence until the letters blurred. Near the bottom, her father had written 1 line she would carry longer than all the others. "If you are in American hands, then at least there is a chance. At least there is a chance." Her father, who had spent years hearing speeches about the enemy, now found hope in the fact that his daughter had been captured by that enemy. Klara folded the note and pressed it against her mouth. Avery looked away to give her privacy. That, too, was a kind of answer. By early January, the women were moved west, then to a port, then onto a ship so crowded that the Atlantic seemed to breathe through the metal walls. Klara spent most of the crossing seasick and silent. When the ship reached America, she expected ruins. Every German city in her mind had become rubble, so she imagined war must leave marks everywhere. But the train windows showed her another planet. Farmhouses with roofs, towns with lit windows, children walking to school, gas stations, clotheslines, church steeples, stores with fruit in the window. The other women stared as if abundance itself were an accusation. "How can they fight a war?" Annalise whispered. "And still have glass in the windows?" No one answered. The temporary women's compound in Tennessee had barracks, mattresses, hot water twice a week, and 3 meals a day. The food was plain. The rules were strict. The fence was real. But nobody had to stand on frozen ground until collapse. Klara was assigned to clerical work because she typed well and could understand enough English to follow instructions. She filed forms in an administration room run by Captain Ruth Caldwell of the Women's Army Corps. Captain Caldwell had gray eyes, blunt hands, and a way of looking directly at people that made lies feel inconvenient. For weeks, Klara said nothing beyond what work required. Then Germany surrendered. The announcement was read in the yard in English, then German. The war in Europe was over. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. Some prisoners cried, some stared at the ground, 1 woman crossed herself. Klara felt only emptiness. A country had ended, a lie had ended, a childhood had ended. None of those endings knew what to become. A few days later, newspapers arrived with photographs from liberated camps, not prisoner camps like theirs. Places with names that seemed to tear holes through language. Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. Klara looked at the photographs until Captain Caldwell gently took the paper from her hands. "I did not know," Klara whispered. Caldwell did not soften the answer. Some didn't, some refused to, some knew pieces and looked away. Klara could not defend herself. There was nothing in her mouth except shame. The next afternoon, while filing medical records, she finally asked the question that had been growing inside her since the frozen pen in France. "Captain Caldwell?" "Yes." "Why did Lieutenant Mercer help us?" Caldwell looked up. Klara forced herself to continue. "That night in France, We were German. We were prisoners. Your men were cold, too. They had heard things about what German soldiers had done. He could have left us there. Caldwell set down her pen. He could have. Then why not? Caldwell leaned back. Because prisoners are not weather. You don't just let things happen to them. Klara frowned, trying to understand the English. Caldwell opened a drawer and took out a small booklet. The 1929 Geneva Convention, she said. Rules for prisoners of war, food, shelter, medical care, protection from humiliation and violence. Your government signed it, mine signed it, but rules can be ignored. Yes, they often are. Yes. Then why follow them when the enemy does not? Caldwell's face changed. Not anger exactly. Something heavier. Because the rules are not a gift to the enemy, she said. They are a guardrail for us. Klara said nothing. Caldwell tapped the booklet with one finger. If we only keep our standards when the other side deserves it, then they are not standards. They are bargains. The room seemed to shrink around those words. Caldwell continued, quieter now. What your government did cannot be repaired by us becoming cruel to you. Cruelty does not balance cruelty, it multiplies it. Klara thought of the frozen pen, the boards. Avery's hand touching the ground. Lieutenant Mercer turning away before anyone could thank him. So he helped us because of law? Partly. And because of kindness? Maybe. Then what was the other part? Caldwell closed the booklet. Because he did not want the cold to make the decision for him. That sentence stayed. It followed Klara into the barracks. It followed her into sleep. It followed her onto the ship months later when repatriation finally began. Before she left, Captain Caldwell handed her the booklet in German. Its cover was plain. No decoration, no speech, just rules. Take it home, Caldwell said. Why? Because Germany is going to be rebuilt by people who have to decide what kind of country obeys when nobody is watching. Klara held the booklet with both hands. Do you think we can? Caldwell did not answer quickly. I think you had better. Home was not home at first. Ulm smelled of wet ash. The clock shop still had its sign, but the windows were gone and the tall walnut clock had been crushed beneath a beam. Her father had saved a box of small tools from the rubble. Her mother had saved photographs. Marta had saved ration cards. Oscar had not come back. For 2 days Klara could not speak about America, not because there was nothing to say, because there was too much. On the third night, her father asked about captivity while scraping rust from a screwdriver by candlelight. Were they cruel? Klara thought of the word. Cruel. It was such a simple box for such a complicated truth. No, she said. Her father stopped scraping. No, they were strict, they were suspicious, sometimes impatient, but not cruel. Her mother looked up from a torn coat she was mending. What did they do? Klara stared at the candle flame. She could have told them about the barracks, the food, the train. The officer who gave her the booklet. Instead, she told them about the ground, about the pen in France, about Annalise falling, about asking a guard to let them sit, about his hand on the frozen mud, about trucks arriving in the dark with broken doors, straw, and canvas. When she finished, no one spoke. Her father put the screwdriver down. At last he said, he listened before deciding what was broken. Klara looked at him. The old clockmaker's rule had come back from another country, wearing an enemy uniform. Yes, she said. He listened. Years passed. Klara married a schoolteacher in 1948. She taught typing first, then English, then civic history to students who had no memory of sirens and burned barrels. She kept Captain Caldwell's booklet in a drawer beneath clean handkerchiefs. When her children asked why, she said some papers are not important because they are old. They are important because people once forgot what they meant. In 1983, an interviewer recording memories of German prisoners asked her what she remembered most clearly. Klara was 74 then. Her hands had become her father's hands, thin and precise, always straightening corners of paper. The interviewer expected her to mention the ship, or the food in America, or the shame of seeing the camp photographs. Klara shook her head. The hand, she said. What hand? The American guard. He touched the ground. She paused so long the recorder clicked in the silence. I told him we could not sit because the earth was frozen. He did not understand my words completely, but he checked. He made himself know whether I was telling the truth. And then? Then his officer put wood between us and the ground. The interviewer asked whether that felt like mercy. Klara considered this. Mercy sounds too soft, she said. It was stronger than softness. It was discipline against the easy thing. What was the easy thing? To leave us standing. Her voice thinned but did not break. War gives people many excuses, orders, anger, shortages, revenge, paperwork, weather. Everyone can point to something and say, "It was not me. It was the situation." She looked down at her hands, but that officer did not let the situation choose for him. Klara Weiss never claimed that a few planks erased the war. They did not bring back Oscar. They did not rebuild the shop. They did not answer for what Germany had done. They did not make captivity freedom, but they did something smaller and maybe harder. They proved that power still had a choice, even at night, even in winter, even through wire, even when the person suffering wore the wrong uniform. Lieutenant Mercer did not end the war by ordering board, straw, and canvas into a prison pen. Private Avery did not change history by touching frozen mud with his bare fingers. But Klara carried the memory for nearly 40 years because it showed her the shape of a country she had not been raised to imagine. A country was not only flags, not only speeches, not only victories. Sometimes it was a tired officer with every excuse to do nothing, deciding that the cold would not be allowed to speak for him. And on a frozen patch of France, the line between cruelty and civilization was only an inch of wood. Someone chose to put it there.